Thank you all for joining us. Today's sessions, Good Security is Shared Security. And my name is Gayleen Gray. I'm the Assistant Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at McMaster University. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it's located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. I'm your facilitator today, moderator, and I'm going to ask Jill Kowalchuk if she'll introduce herself, please.
Thanks, Gayleen. I'm Jill Kowalchuk. I am the CanSSOC Director. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in Southern Alberta, from where I'm joining today. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3.
Thank you. Chad, how about you go next, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Chad Coller. I'm President and CEO of SRNET, and I'm joining you from Saskatoon, which I'd like to acknowledge is Treaty 6 territory, the traditional territory of the Cree peoples, and also the homeland of the Métis Nation.
Thank you. And Isaac.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isaac Straley. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for both the University of Toronto and for the CanSSOC project. And I wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today's meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful for the opportunity to work on this land.
And welcome to all of you for wherever you are across our beautiful country. I'm going to ask my colleagues here if they'll do an introduction to each of their areas of expertise and oversight. And I'm going to start first with asking Jill if she'll kick us off around CanSSOC, please.
Thanks, Gayleen. So as Gayleen noted, I'm only going to spend a couple of minutes introducing CanSSOC in this session. If you've heard this before, please bear with me, but I think it's important to start the foundation, not only for this presentation, but for a number of presentations you're going to hear over the course of the week. So the CanSSOC mission is better than we can do on our own, always in partnership. And while I realize this is a very simplistic approach, when we step back and consider these words, it really is a strong foundation for how we can maximize investments, existing relationships, existing personnel and resources, and our strength in numbers to tackle this growing information security challenge. Good security is shared security. We cannot do this alone, and every single day since I started in this role, I've seen firsthand the economic disadvantage that we're at when we don't collaborate. Similarly, I can also see the power and opportunity we have when we work together. I could present at every single one of the CANHEIT sessions over the course of this week, real life examples that we have seen over the last few months of how collaboration can help us protect against the growing cybersecurity threat facing the sector. Not to worry, you won't have to listen to me throughout the entire week, but CanSSOC is working with a number of different partners and organizations to give a number of different sessions on different components and opportunities. And every single one of those sessions is done in partnership, emphasizing the importance of the partnership component of the mission. Most of these are going to be done with NREN partners, and Chad will talk a little bit about what the NREN does. And oftentimes with one or more institutions that's using or using the service or the component that we're talking about. So today and across the course of the week, you're going to hear a lot about this concept of the federation. That is the partnership between regional organizations, national and federal organizations, all working together to secure the sector to support institutions. I know firsthand that the concept of a federation and leveraging the federation can certainly be a challenge. But the opportunity presents is too great for, given the challenge we have in the information security space. On this slide, you see that CanSSOC is just one component of the partnership. We are just one piece of the puzzle. We are not the solution or proposing that we're solution to everything, but we do see how if we can all work together, we can really improve what we're all doing and better secure the sector. And you'll hear a lot about this both today and across the week. Gayleen, next slide. Before I pass it on to Chad, I do want to talk a little bit about where we specialize and what we're specializing. So for many on this call, I don't need to explain sort of the NIST framework that has 5 key areas: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Many of us use this as the framework. It provides a really good basis for engaging and having conversations in the information security space. CanSSOC's focus really is on this detection and response areas. And the reason we're focusing there is for a few reasons. First, this is a big challenge. I'm not going to go into this. I'm sure later Isaac can talk in great detail about how much of a challenge this is for institutions. Identifying and protecting institutions is absolutely critical, and a lot of institutions can and should spend resources in this space. But as we all know, no matter how much we work to protect our institutions, it's not a matter of if we get impacted or compromised, but when. And the ability to quickly and effectively detect these compromises and respond to it is absolutely critical. CanSSOC, in partnership with the NREN and others, is working towards developing solutions, bringing together intelligence. Many of you have probably heard about Threat Feed, which is recently launched as part of the CANHEIT cybersecurity initiatives program. And if not, there's a session in the coming weeks that will dive into this a little bit more detail, focusing exactly on how institutions are using this. And these are just a few key areas of the foundation for how we're working towards this detection and response and sharing actionable intelligence with institutions across Canada. So with that, I am going to pass it on to Chad, who will talk a little bit more about the NREN, what the NREN is, and what they're doing in the cybersecurity space. Chad?
Thanks, Jill. I feel like you could have easily introduced the NREN as well, given your long history with us. So I'm here today as a member of Canada's National Research and Education Network. It's a federation of 13 regional partners and our national partner, CANHEIT. We call ourselves an essential collective of infrastructure, tools, and people that bolsters Canada's leadership in research, education, and innovation. I'm sure most of you are familiar with CANHEIT, and you're likely familiar with the NREN partner in your province or territory. But I've got a map on the next slide of sort of who we all are so that you can see us from coast to coast to coast. So responding to the needs of our connected institutions, NREN partners have been increasingly embodying this session's ideal that good security is shared security. We've been bringing our members together to collaborate on security initiatives, and we've been providing an increasing number of security-focused shared services. As a federation, we've undertaken a national security information and event management project that saw SIM get deployed within each NREN partner, and that in turn has evolved into regional SIM as a service in several provinces already, including BC and Ontario. Alongside that project, we built out a distributed team of cybersecurity analysts who work with their connected institutions and also with each other across regional boundaries to solve the security challenges that we all face. If you could move to the next slide, Gayleen. Over the past year, we've sort of taken stock of our respective growth from networking into cybersecurity. We've looked at the benefits of shared security for Canadian higher ed, and we've reflected on the strengths of the federated model. And we've come together to commit collectively to being our institution's trusted regional partners for cybersecurity. So to meet this ambition, we've recognized the need for a strong, sustainable cybersecurity capacity. And this is going to involve both new strategic investments within and partnerships between our regional organizations. We also acknowledge the growing number of cybersecurity offerings that are available to Canadian higher ed. And while a rich ecosystem is beneficial in meeting the diverse needs of our institutions, the breadth of what's available can often prove daunting. If you could advance, Gayleen. So we are committed to helping coordinate and integrate with services from outside of the NREN itself to work with partners like CanSSOC, national service providers, and to help present a coherent catalog to our connected institutions. If you can move to the next slide, we've distilled our role really down to 6 statements that you'll see over the next couple slides. We seek to be unbiased, trusted advisors and to give our institutions some clarity and context around all of the national cybersecurity strategies and services that are available. We'd like to act as direct extensions to your IT teams for cybersecurity expertise, whether that is through a shared CISO program or through a pool of analysts that you can tap into. We'd like to help with the success of national cybersecurity programs, whether that is awareness raising or onboarding, or even providing regional support for services where it makes sense. Next slide. We'd like to provide and continue to grow our own complementary cybersecurity services within regions. We'd like to act as a channel for the voice of our community, championing local and regional needs and realities on the national stage, and to give some linkage between regional government and national programs. And finally, we'd like to advocate for equity so that regardless of institutions' size, capacity, or location, all of you can benefit from the cybersecurity resources that are being offered to the sector. I'm thrilled to join my colleagues on stage today to talk about how we're going to do this best together.
Okay, so I'm going to now stop sharing so you get a bigger view of all of us. That's the end of our slide deck for this presentation, and not the end of the conversation, which is what we're here for. So I want to thank my colleagues for providing those overviews, and I wanted to say that every time I hear it, I know this because I'm deeply steeped in it, and it's always still a learning opportunity for me whenever I hear. So thanks, Chad, especially around the NREN. I think that's a great way of helping people to understand better what that is. So let's get started in our conversation. And Isaac, I am going to start with you. I want to know if you can share with all of us from an institutional perspective at the University of Toronto, what do you see as the biggest gaps or challenges facing your institution as it pertains to cybersecurity?
So what are the biggest gaps? Can I say all of them?
Isaac, I think you've got a little bit of a problem with your headset, perhaps.
All right. So, yeah, give me a...
Sorry about that. Yeah. Hey, we're all in IT. This is normal.
All right, I was just trying to cover my pandemic hair. Are we good with that?
Roll with it.
All right. So what are the biggest gaps we have? Can I say all of them? Because I think it's all of them. It's a very challenging landscape. And as we look at, certainly as I am my role as the Chief Information Security Officer for the University of Toronto, look at what we're trying to achieve in our security program, especially as somebody who has direct accountability to ensure that we're running a proper program and we're protecting our assets and we're enabling the institution. And I think this is where it gets really tricky too, is not only do we have to protect and defend and all of the fancy security words we use, but at the end of the day, those things have to move our institutions forward, not just keep us stable, not just keep us static, but move us forward. And so that's the first thing, is making sure that we've got the resources, the expertise, and the capacity to really innovate in a way that allows us to continue to push boundaries, especially as I look across the Canadian landscape. There's so much opportunity for us to to use our innovation, use our resources to do something really meaningful in the world at a national scale across the country. And certainly as we get institution to institution, we look at the competitiveness of dollars and research, but at the end of the day, our institutions are collaborating more and more every day. And that's another challenge that I see is our people are collaborating, whether it's groups like this who get together and work together, whether it's different administrative units that try to figure out better wins, whether it's in a particular province or again sort of across boundaries, and certainly our researchers are, and especially as you look at the research landscape. That's something that I think a lot about from the University of Toronto perspective is these people are already working together, and if they have to navigate a number of different challenges, and this is true in teaching and learning too, this is another area where we just continue to see innovation happening, especially I think as we've got all the borders and boundaries dropping because of the remote world we're in. We're going to learn a lot from this, and part of what we're going to learn is not only is security hard, but doing security well consistently is hard. One of the other things too is, for me, it's very easy to sell protection programs. It's very easy to say, it's easier than it used to be, at least, to say, well, we can put up a firewall, or we can use encryption, or I can throw all kinds of other technical jargon out in terms of prevention programs. But if I can make a pretty solid case to say, if we put this money in, we think we can protect these assets, or we can protect this, or we can enable this opportunity. We're using that a lot with MFA. What's much harder is the defense posture. So in the cybersecurity framework model that Jill talked about, one of the reasons I really like it is it embeds to me a thought model that's worth paying attention to. So identify, protect, that's what we typically do in security, right? When we think about security. Detect, respond, and recover is 3/5 of the model. And that's telling in and of itself. Things are going to go wrong. And this is where you need a lot more expertise. And we've got some great security people at the University of Toronto, but they still don't know everything because who can, right? I think that's a big part of it. So there's a lot of shared knowledge opportunities. The other thing too is it's very expensive to do this. The technology that you need, especially to do it well. Our adversaries are very well resourced, and your adversaries, you can count it from, and I have lots of conversations with my colleagues across the country about this, is, we can obviously spend a lot of time at the highly mature so you're talking nation states, high criminal activity. So certainly they have an economic advantage. But even if you look at the sort of low grade grass, variety, garden varieties, what I'm looking for, attacks on the internet, they're so plentiful that it doesn't matter if they're complicated. They just have an economic advantage against us too, right? They have to get in once. We have to defend everything. And so being able to effectively, efficiently, and actionably identify issues and respond to them, because it's easy to stand up some sort of system where you can say, okay, what are we seeing? And you just get an avalanche of alerts. How do we triage them? How do we make them effective? And how do we help each other? Because our institutions aren't isolated in their attacks too. And so that's maybe the last challenge I'll wrap up on to answer your question, with is we each have information that can help each other out. And I don't have access, even in our shared trusted community of security leaders, it's very hard to get that information because institutions have lots of incentives to protect that information. And what we've seen is that even in the garden variety issues, because a lot of ransomware is becoming basically garden variety at its scale and scope right now, if one institution sees something, can shut it down and can get that information sharing across faster, then we can take advantage of that, and vice versa. We can contribute meaningfully into that culture. And so just access to information that's timely, actionable, and relevant is probably one of those challenges that's really meaningful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, everything that you said, I can resonate with. And the other piece, of course, the interesting thing in being academic institutions, we have very adventurous and creative and smart people within our own environments that sometimes bring with them their own joys and delights in terms of cybersecurity challenges too. So everything you said makes sense to me. So Chad, I'm going to turn to you next. And what people may not know based on the introductions is that you actually come out of higher education as well. You used to be with one of the institutions in Saskatchewan. So you've had the insider perspective on things, as well as now being part of SRNET. So as the CEO of SRNET, where you help to deal with a wide range of institutions across your province, I wonder if you can talk about those challenges from that bigger perspective. Obviously, you have probably some resonance with what Isaac talked about as well, but talking about it from all of your constituencies.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And you're right that there's I think for every NREN partner, there's a huge diversity of institutions that they serve, right? Both in terms of scale and scope. We have, connected members that are large medical doctoral universities with large research programs, and we have, small fine arts colleges or cégeps or other institutions that are, they're quite different from one another. And the opportunity is there to collaborate and to collaborate extensively, but it requires care to address and to set up that collaboration, given the differences in size and scale. As I transitioned into this role and sort of got more exposure to institutions outside of universities and smaller institutions, came sort of the realization that there's challenges even in knowing sort of current posture for some smaller institutions, right? Some smaller institutions have one or zero security focused staff, and the IT staff at those institutions are already spread about as thin as possible, covering operations and the small number of projects that they take on. And security, although it's a high level of importance for their leadership, is a difficult thing to tackle in that context. And my last point on my slides about ensuring a measure of equity, it's quite important to me. And I think that by working in a collaborative way, we can help instill some of the gains that have been realized at larger institutions that have perhaps had more lead time on this, more funding to invest, but quickly translate that into ways that smaller institutions can also see some of the same benefits. I think having a federated model where there are people that act as almost like a maitre d' with a menu of services that are available to institutions to explain what the services are, what their context is to the institution, the value that they can find, and then that really helps them onboard with those services, right? That's a key thing. There are so many services already available and so many services envisioned that will provide tremendous value, tremendous shared value to our connected institutions, but we'll fail in that, or we won't fully realize the value if we don't find a way to get everybody on board in a sort of low friction, painless kind of manner, right? And I think that's where cooperation between national providers and regional partners is really going to come into play, right? Is tackling that challenge to make sure that even smaller institutions that don't have maybe the dedicated security staff that can just see a program and understand immediately how it fits within their security plans can still take advantage of those types of programs. I would echo Isaac's comments about barriers to sharing information. I don't think that differs much whether you're large or small. We've had a reasonable sized institution in Saskatchewan suffer a major security breach within the last year that many of you would be aware of. And they've often expressed frustration about the inability to share information about that breach with their colleagues that would be helpful to everybody, in terms of, as Isaac said, quickly rippling that security, across the rest of the institutions that receive that information. So I think we really need to tackle that challenge outside of the context of a breach, because you're not going to get the security sharing agreement set up, while you're under a clampdown order from your legal team and from your IR team. We really need to put in some concerted effort there ahead of time, so that when those incidents happen, we've already paved the way to make that information sharing, quick and painless, so it can do the most good in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for that. Those are cultural components that, are a key aspect of cybersecurity programs, obviously. And I 100% agree the value in the sharing across our sector is massive. And we need to have that, what we refer to as actionable intelligence in order to improve our collective security posture. And this is a part of what we've been talking about, both in terms of CanSSOC, but also I know the NREN, this is a top topic. And Jill, I know that you're a champion for sharing. We've certainly discussed this on numerous occasions, more recent, of course, as well. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit to what CanSSOC is doing to support that aspect of our cybersecurity model.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you listen to Isaac and Chad talk about some of the gaps and challenges, that one of the items that comes up is this way to effectively share information. And so one of the opportunities we see related to CanSSOC and the partnership with the NREN is this way to create a trusted network, a trusted resource for institutions to share information in an anonymized way. And so I would like to echo Chad's comment around the importance of us dealing with this when we aren't in the middle of an incident. We have worked with a number of institutions when they are in the middle of the incident, around both supporting them as well as gathering information to share out to others. And part of that supporting them is even in just having one place where we can share information that we know if there is anything to share, it will get shared out with the broader community and it will remain anonymized. And so over the last number of months, we have done this a number of times. For all the institutions out there, I encourage you, if you have anything that you can and are willing to share, please send us a note at report@cansoc.ca. And what we can and will do with that information is very much take the direction from you. So if the institution says, we're only comfortable with this getting put into the threat feed platform and sharing out via the feed, but it's in a inconspicuous way with zero attribution whatsoever, then that is the action we will take. The next level, and the thing that we would encourage all institutions to provide permission to, is in addition to putting into threat feed, providing us the opportunity to write an advisory out to the broader community. So this will reference those indicators that were disclosed to us in the threat feed platform, but also provide some additional context around the threat actor and information that was shared with us. This allows institutions to not only protect themselves if they're ingested into the firewall from future attacks, but it also allows institutions to look on their networks and see if they've potentially already been compromised and stop it before that compromise gets worse. In addition, and again, we'll do that with written permission from the institution only with that opportunity. We also will look and see if the institution is comfortable to share out with our global partners. And we have a session later today where we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. So I won't go into details. And with permission, we will share to the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity as well. So this is a great opportunity to not only relieve some of the pressure from the institution that's sharing around having to disclose with all of the institutions that they collaborate with in a centralized and coordinated way, but also to maintain that confidentiality and support. I'll also note that while we're talking just about sharing information and actionable intelligence and emails and putting it in threat feed, there's a lot associated behind the scenes with both what we can do with this right now, as well as we could potentially do in the future. And a big part of that is working with the NREN partners like Chad talked about. We've started more detailed conversations with BCNet and Orion and others across the entire NREN about how that NREN partner could potentially look at searching some logs that they're ingesting in their SIM solution. And there's sessions later this week on that as well. We're also working on looking to open up discussions with Canary and the IDS and Joint Security Project around what are the opportunities to support institutions in furthering the way that they use the Zeek logs and the Zeek sensors to really enhance this detection and response. So the sky is the limit. We're really only scratching the surface, but this is a great way to start those discussions. Isaac, Chad, is there anything you wanted to add on that area?
I was going to say it's also an area where we can leverage relationships that already exist. So Gayleen, you talked about cultural change and the difficulty in overcoming some of that culture when it's around sharing information. And I think trust takes time to build, and I think it's important that we constantly are working towards expanding and building that trust so that the information can be shared and leveraged as widely as possible. But as we get there, I think there's opportunities to share the information in limited ways, right? So I think about things like working in a consortium model within a province if it already exists, right? And you say, well, we've already been collaborating, under a particular banner in Alberta. There's a secure AV program where perhaps the institutions are willing to share information with one another that they wouldn't want to make public outside of that particular circle of trust. Great, let's start there. Share that information as broadly as you can within that circle, and then let's figure out how to grow that from there. So I think there's a good opportunity for national providers and regional partners from the NREN to synergize there, to say, hey, there's ways we can leverage some of the trusted relationships that the NREN partners have with their institutions, because they're our members. They are on our boards of directors. They have controlling interests in our organizations, and we exist to serve them. So there's a measure of inbuilt trust there to say, share, at least start by sharing information that broadly, and then let's work to extend that up to national roll-ups and cross-border, inter-region sharing as much as possible. But take advantage of those relationships that already exist to share information as widely as possible, as quickly as possible, and then use that as a growth point.
Yeah, absolutely. Isaac?
Yeah, and I'll touch briefly. I'll take the end result of that, because the sharing is critical. But what we do with it is even more critical. And this goes a little bit to Nav's question in the chat too, because for me, it's the once we know that there are things to look out for, and especially if they are curated, which I think is part of the message here, because it's not just sharing it, but it's also helping give it some context and making sure that it's useful, it's rational, it's realized. Like I was just having a discussion yesterday with one of our students who, because I do some mentorship with our cybersecurity students, and he's been working on a program to say this quickly. I just decided to say this. Sorry. He's been working on a program to validate the quality of the alerts that we're getting, because right now what they do is they have a process with a lot of alerts where somebody manually looks at all of those alerts, right? And even if they're high confidence, they have to look at them because we don't want false positives, right? The cost of having false positives is quite high here. But one of the things he was saying is as these alerts get better curated, he was excited because it's like the quality is getting higher and higher, where the false positives are so low that we can just trust it, right? And that ability to take these things and automate it is, I think, relevant to any institution, whether you've got limited security resources and no time, having something that you can just block on so you can get that proactive protection. Well, and certainly our end, that we know that we can just start an incident response process, even if some things happen, right? Like the more we can automate these pieces, and we can have the human being spend their valuable time working on hard, interesting, creative problems. Because to me, this is also maximizing the people from a resource perspective, but also from the human perspective, giving people interesting things to do so they'll stay. Because this is, it's not a lot of today's conversation, but it's also one of our challenges is retention. And the more we can give people interesting things that they can do, that is creative and fun, because there's a lot of fun stuff in cybersecurity that's not pushing through alerts and looking through logs. And so to me, this is part of what actionable means. It means that I can trust the information and that we can build systems and processes to automate as much as possible these pieces, which decreases our protection time, decreases our response time, and increases the value of the time our people put into the work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And you've touched on so many important components there, Isaac. We also have some students working with our IT security team. And I do also want to just say, so, I bought the program, so to speak. We recently had a security incident, which some of you are aware of. And I absolutely am a proponent for sharing and have built that into some of my cultural conversations with my own leadership at McMaster. And it was great. I had a chat with Jill, and she took some, it was very seamless and easy for me, for her to be able to take our information and share that in a positive way. So just a plug in for that as well. Lots of great things that have been talked about. I want to just a couple of points of business before I move us on. First, we are about 15 minutes away from time. So I want to just let my colleagues know that they need to just keep that in mind so we can open up for questions. Also, because we're very multitasking capable people, or as some people I know call it, multi-faking, there is a whole slew of things happening in the chat. So if any of you want to take off some of those questions while you're not talking and respond to the chat, that can speed us along in some of the responses as well. And thanks to everybody. We will get to your questions shortly. I do now, though, want to move over to talking a little bit about specific solutions so that we can give people a little bit more tangible components of what's going to be available vis-a-vis the NREN and CanSSOC that can support the sharing approach, but also just what's happening. And so, Jill, I'm going to ask you to start, if you don't mind, and then obviously I want to go to my other colleagues, Chad and Isaac, for their add-ins as well. So Jill, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gayleen. So I'm actually going to take a slightly different approach to answer this question than we had sort of prepped in advance, to work on answering the question that Mary Cloud put in the chat as well, so we can answer them as we go along and I think Isaac did that with NAV, so I encourage everybody, as you noted, to continue to do that. To further discussion. So Mary Cloud asked the question around, assume we're not suggesting that institutions do not set up their own SOC teams, but allow institutions to benefit complementary type services. So the answer is absolutely, you are correct. That is certainly the sort of intent. And so if I can talk a little bit more about what we currently have and what we're looking at in the future and how that would relate. So we've sort of developed this concept of two components, essential services and advanced detection and response. And on the essential services side, it's actually a set of different components in there that allow us to work with NREN partners and institutions to more effectively provide some detection and response, or essential detection and response. I'm not going to use the word basic because Gayleen says I'm not allowed, but it really is, I did, it really is a way to support institutions that don't have as many resources out there, with an opportunity of what might be impacting their network, what might be a priority piece of information that they need to prioritize and leverage to protect themselves or detect and respond to an incident. So examples include, if you participate in the CUCHO benchmarking and continuous monitoring project, CanSSOC analysts have access to that ongoing scans from BitSite. We leverage that to look at it and see if there's an emerging vulnerability out there, and a BitSite scan indicates that you might be impacted, like the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability. We sent out a bunch of targeted notices to institutions, so this sort of addresses NAV's questions as well, saying, look, you've probably heard about Microsoft, the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability. You are potentially directly impacted by this. We've seen this specific piece of information. Here's how you might be able, here's the steps you need to follow, and reach out if you need more info. That's just one example, and we're looking at leveraging that with other things. So we look at Showdown on a regular basis. We look at different vulnerability management components as a regular basis, and things that are light touch or easy information that we can get about an institution that we can impact them or provide intelligence about that. For the institutions that have SIMs or are looking at SOCs or are working with their NREN partner on the shared SIM initiative inside that initiative, again, the intent is not to replace them. In fact, we feel it's absolutely critical to leverage them. What we're looking from the CanSSOC perspective, and this is on the advanced detection response side, is how can we pull together different pieces of intelligence to get, again, advanced detection and response across multiple institutions across the country, leveraging what we're seeing in threat intelligence, leveraging what we're seeing in vulnerability management, potentially get more information around assets, and bring that together in a more holistic program with more, going back to now's point, actionable intelligence. And when we see this from the perspective of the wide range of institutions, on one end of the spectrum, actionable intelligence might be quite a bit of information, like U of T or U of Vic. We might send a lot more. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, where they have fewer information security resources, it might be one or two key things they want to look at. And the NREN partners are key in helping us prioritize that. Chad, did you want to add any more about how you see this rolling out in that partnership with the NREN?
Yeah, well, Mary Claude, you made a comment about it, complementary SOC type services, and I think that's key, is complementary, right? We know that institutions have already and will continue to stand up their own security operations center capability depending on their size and their scale, and that there will be some who can never stand up that sort of function, and that both ends of the spectrum need to be supported, and that means national SOCs need to be able to interface with institutional, but also regional SOCs in between, right? And that there are many complementary ways for that to happen, and by having that I guess level of interfacing in between, you also get some of the context that helps you make sense of that actionable intelligence, right? That if you see something in a national system, being able to fully make a determination, is it relevant to this connected institution, requires context. And the hope of full automation and integration of all the information to let you do that without a human is lofty. and I think what we should all be aiming for, but it takes a lot, it takes time. And on the journey there, that requires local context and familiarity and relationships. And I think that's where having that complementary layered SOC model will be sort of highly beneficial to the institutions, because you will have someone at your hip who's familiar with what you've got and what state you're in, and you'll have somebody nationally who's aggregating data and can see what's happening everywhere in the country at once and quickly feed information down to you, and someone in between who's able to help provide context and assist. Sometimes you'll be receiving information from CanSSOC or from another the CCCS about what they're seeing, and you'll say, even if you've given me actionable instructions on what I can do, I still need some help with making sure that I don't have these indicators of compromise, or that I'm getting help cleaning up. And that's where I think the partnership will come into play, and you've got some resources that are local to you effectively in your region to assist with that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And actually, it's interesting because David Fox had posted a question that I think feeds really nicely into this whole issue around service catalogs. So I'm going to throw it out there to say, let's talk about that, because it's been a topic of conversation across our various tables when we come together and collectively, certainly through KUCHU and CanSSOC and the NREN. Anybody? Jill, maybe do you want to start with that?
Sure, I can start. So David, I would say that this is a question, as Gayleen noted, that has come up time and time again. From our, so first off, this is, again, just to reiterate why the NREN partners are really key in this, because they have both additional context about what might exist inside that province or region. They also have the ability to provide more wayfinding as it relates to that. CanSSOC is working with those NREN partners to support that, and what that looks like varies by province. So in the case of BCNet, we very much support BCNet and Cyber and these activities. Inside other provinces, we provide more hands-on if that's what that NREN partner says they would like, the role they would like us to play. But what we're seeing, when we look at the development of solutions and what's out there, we're really looking at how can all institutions use these. So for those institutions which have fewer resources, what are things that can be leveraged that are very light touch and simple to use? So threat feed is one where I'll talk about in the context that for institutions, they can integrate it into their next gen firewall, turn it on, takes a couple hours from the network administrator, and it's a set it and forget it. And as we do that, we're working on building out what other key easy to use solutions are while institutions tackle some of those other bigger challenges. I haven't completely answered the question, but I want to pass it over to Isaac and Chad if they want to dive a little bit more on from their perspective.
Yeah, and let's leave a couple of minutes for questions from the crowd. I know you guys are actively answering as they come up in the chat as well, but Chad, Isaac, and then we'll go to the larger group for questions.
So on the service catalog side, I mean, I think the short of it is there's many partners across the country who are working on amazing services, whether this is the NREN itself, the individual NREN partners in the programs they're running, CIRA, others, and there's lots of opportunities for others to step up into this too, by the way. And that's something that I hope you take away from this is the point of doing this is not to build a thing that does stuff. The point of this is to create momentum in our community and to provide pathways to be able to integrate information and work together, working together as part. And there's lots of opportunities for others to step into this space. The service catalog is being worked on. It's not done yet. But from my perspective, what we're working on is the ability to help navigate where these sort of different pieces fit, so you can see how you can get access to them. It's a very confusing landscape. Certainly, from my perspective, I see the NREN partners as a pivotal piece of that, as Chad introed us with. There's a large opportunity to be able to navigate the services through that lens, because they're in a very good position in most cases to understand the needs of the institutions, what's happening in the province, and what funding opportunities there, what's happening on the national level. And so that's my expectation is that we'll see the NREN partners be able to continue to craft a view into the services that makes sense in the more local context. Because as Chad already said, all security is local, right? It doesn't matter there's all these services, it matters how you use them and how they integrate with other pieces.
That's great. Thanks, Isaac. Okay, well, Chad, maybe I can suggest, so I just posted in the chat as well that if you have questions, you're welcome to put them there, or you can come off mute. This is a meeting environment, so if you come off mute, we will be able to hear you. I do want to point out we are getting very close to time, so we probably won't be able to answer many more than maybe one or two questions if we're lucky. The good news is there's lots of CanSSOC sessions this week. It's CanSSOC everywhere, so you can chase the presenters into different sessions and ask them your questions there, or of course reach out to any of us. Any specific questions? Anybody got a good one that you can end us on? We've got something from good comments coming in the chat as well. I think everybody's going to feel like inhibited now about putting a question forward. So maybe very briefly, I can just ask everybody to take a look through the program and find those other CanSSOC sessions. Reach out to any of us regarding any of the questions you may have. And I'm glad that people have been able to get some answers in the chat as well. Maybe very briefly, could I ask one of you just to talk about SIM? I think it relates a little bit to some of the hybrid activities and that you've already touched on. Chad, do we want to throw that to you just to give you the last word?
Oh, sure. So yeah, as I mentioned, a number of provinces have started extending the deployment of their SIMs for themselves to offering SIM as a service to their members. And it's been proving both highly beneficial, but also eye-opening in terms of the local context that you really do need to make a service like that function. But I think that there's anticipation that will also allow data to flow up at some point, right, to a national collection where, again, it can enrich all the rest of the services, enrich the threat feed, enrich the actionable intelligence that's being produced by CanSSOC in a national capacity. So it's early days. 2 provinces engaged in it right now, but from what I understand, it's going well. They've constrained themselves to a reasonable number of use cases because the SIM deployment could fully consume an analyst laterally on one institution for many, many months. But I know that BCNet has some presentations coming up. I'm not sure if they're at CANHEIT, but in the near weeks about their SIM project to date. So maybe we'll find a way to send out details of that to attendees.
That's great. Thank you for that. There seems to be some confusion about how long this session is going on for, just to flag that for Sheila. I think we believe we're finished up at 12:45, and I know that it may look differently in the program, so I don't know. We're going with the moderator because she's in charge, as much as you all know me.
No, you can go till 1 o'clock.
Oh.
My idea was to be 15 minutes for chat.
Awesome. Sorry for everybody who thought they were going to suddenly get a bio break. We're back. We didn't leave, but we're back. So apparently it is till 1 o'clock now. So thank you, Bo, who is happily chatting me in the background. All right. Well, then we do have more time for questions. So let's push it. Who's got some great questions? Or
hey, Todd. Todd's got his hand up.
Okay. All right. Go, Todd. Yeah, and I can't see the hands right now. Sorry, Todd.
Honoring my father with my Canadians hat, by the way.
Oh, no.
So what's the call to action for us? What can we do? What should we be doing?
It's a great question. Who wants to take it, Jill?
I do. Do you have notes? You got to take notes at this point. No, I exaggerate. So the first thing that I think anyone and everyone can do today is, if you see something, say something. And so reach out to CanSSOC. If something's happening at your institution, no matter how big or small, if you have a challenge or a problem, send us a note. Send it through your NREN partner if you're more comfortable that way, and engage CanSSOC through your NREN partner. But the more we can do that, the more we can work to both support the whole sector as well as you and your institution. So report at canssoc.ca and or through your NREN partner, whatever you are most comfortable with. So that's the first call to action. The second thing I'll note is, over the next couple of months, CanSSOC is working hand in hand with our NREN partners around engaging and collaborating with all institutions. And so we want to understand, we've talked a little bit about what the gaps and challenges are. Isaac talked about it from his perspective. Chad followed up from what he's seeing inside his member institutions. We want to come to you as institutions and have more intimate conversations about validating that, getting more information around your gaps and challenges, and then working on how we can collaboratively work to support that moving forward. So what other solutions need to exist? Does it make the most sense for that to be delivered regionally from your NREN partner? Does it make sense for this to be coordinated and or delivered nationally? We're very much open to that collaborative discussion about what that looks like. It can vary by province. That's okay too. Every NREN partner is different, and we're looking to work on what that looks like. So you will see, the NREN partners and CanSSOC coming to you in the next couple of months as well. So watch for those sessions, join those sessions, tell us what you need, tell us what's working, tell us what isn't working. Shout out to Rob Millman for SAFE, who's doing that in the chat as well, which I think is really excellent. And we need more of that.
That's great.
Chad, did you want to follow up?
I was going to say that's exactly what I was going to add. Yeah, look for that outreach from us, from your NREN partners and from CanSSOC on that engagement, and be ready. Have your laundry list of, these are all the things that I could really use help with, and these are all the things that are going great is nice to hear, but things that you could stand to see improved is even more useful. So be ready to engage on that.
And if I can very briefly add, pulling back on that a little bit, I think the call to action is also, and this may sound pedantic, but it's not intended to be, it's let's work together. It's very hard to do that. It's easy to talk about it. It's hard to do it. Jill and Chad gave you some examples of ways you can do that, both through the CanSSOC reporting perspective and through the participation in conversations and saying something. But also think about, if you've got the opportunity in your institution to roll this message up, right? Because also this is not a technology message. This is an institution working with institution, and we all have to have different versions of collaboration here. And it's going to be different. Like I can't say it specifically because I think it's going to be different for each organization and the way that they work and the way that you work and the way that we work with each other. But I do think that there's a call to action here also that from my perspective, and speaking purely for myself, that there has to be more here in terms of working together. And some of these structures are developing and ongoing, and there's lots of storming as we figure all this out. But from my perspective, I hope you remain committed to working together, because each one of us is better off when we do this. And I think there's meaningful pieces to that. Like, those aren't just words. I think there's meaningful pieces to that. And so also figure out what can be done on the institutional level to enhance that message across the institution, especially up to functional leadership outside of technology.
Yeah, and I just want to ladder on that. I think it is important. Certainly, we talk about this internally at McMaster all the time, the importance of us across the institution working very closely together. And then we flip it outwards and work very collaboratively, or trying to do so with our colleagues in other institutions, and obviously through the organizations we've talked about today, OnCheck, CanSSOC, and working across the country. And it has been, it took me a little bit of time to help get my leadership to understand the value, because there is this perspective of keeping things close to the chest when you're talking about something like cybersecurity. However, they are now proponents of the idea that we can help each other, and they know that we benefit as well as can benefit others in our sharing. So I think it's a really valid point, and it takes all of us in leadership positions within IT, but also just collectively across the country, just reminding ourselves and talking about the good news stories that come out of some of these sharing opportunities to help enhance that. So I think that's really a well taken point. So other questions? Anybody else got something that you want to bring forward, or perhaps any of my esteemed colleagues want to talk about something else that they feel like they wanted to expound upon based on what they've already talked about here? None of us are usually short for words, so I'm sure we can we can come up with something.
I definitely have a few more things to say, but I'm making sure that we get questions and conversation first.
Yeah, Nav has added a really great chat post as well. Thanks, Nav, for that from you, Vic. Appreciate it. Okay, go ahead, Isaac. I'm gonna just say, do it. Let's not have dead air. All good.
Yeah, so I want to dig a little bit more into sort of the SOC and analyst piece of this, because we scraped it, but I think it's something, another area to dig in, because there's lots of opportunity and lots of confusion here. And from a working together perspective, not necessarily from a technical architecture perspective, but from a working together perspective, something that I've been thinking a lot about is, what's the next step beyond just sharing information as well too, as we look at this idea that we've got information, we've got different groups who can work on it, creating greater pools of shared analysts, and shared, it's probably a loaded word in this context, but for what I would love to see, and so this is me as the CISO of the University of Toronto thinking about what would help my institution, and I think be innovative for all of us, is how do we get these people working side by side with each other and helping each other out? Because as I said, we've got high quality analysts at our institution, but they can't know it all. Nobody can know it all, especially as you look at the sort of breadth of threats. And so that's one of the things that I'm really excited about, is as we take these first steps on information sharing, opening up some of the doors within trusted communities, and empowering our security folks. There's a big empowerment message here that I think a lot about. And so one of the things, and this is just sort of forward looking, but I think that there's a real opportunity, and you'll hear this in the later presentation on the global one, because it's something we're looking at that perspective too, is building a global network of security analysts in the research and education sector who can talk with each other and work with each other and help each other out. It's not about having one analyst do somebody else's work, but it's about having these folks who can really build a community, because this is something that I think that the community building is really, there's a real opportunity to increase the value to, on the retention side too, to increase the value to all of these people. But the other thing too is, as we get more and more people thinking about different contexts, that's going to also improve the data and tools we have access to. And that's one of the things, like when we talk about, where do we have one SOC or multiple SOCs? Do we have one SIM or multiple SIMs, right? It's a federated mesh complex web, which is rightfully so. We've got individual institutions and a federated network. But I think we can help provide access to people and tools together. And that's sort of the big thing to be thinking about is, this is not national down or one system down, right? It's about all of these pieces working together, and then putting, for me, what's really important, putting the people together to work on this and empowering them to really own this space. Because I think there's also a gap in empowerment of our security staff and security teams to really be able to navigate the complexity of this landscape. And that's one of the things I'm really interested in seeing, is being able to give, so again, from the institutional perspective, to give more tools, more information, and more direct access to people. Sometimes it's just to kvetch, and sometimes it's really to work through a problem. But if I can provide that, I'm going to make my investments better and my people better for those relationships.
Yeah.
That's a good call to action, right? Like over the last year, the distributed NREN analyst team, which has been gathering and doing the same kind of work in the same kind of platforms for a couple of years now, has really taken off as a group that's gelled, working across boundaries. And I want to see that kind of thing exist across institutions as well. And the key was finding meaningful work for them to do together, right? Not the kvetching sessions are great, and commiserating when you're in an industry that's under constant bombardment, like cybersecurity is a necessary valve to let off steam, but giving them meaningful work to collaborate on, and then letting them go and saying, you've got time to work on this. And some of the benefits to this work is going to accrue outside of my NREN partner org. It's actually going to accrue to somebody else, but that's okay, because we need to work together in that capacity to eventually get something out of it for all of us. And I want to see that extend across our analysts, the CanSSOC analysts, and for sure institutional analysts. So that is a definite call for action. Give your institutional analysts, if you have them, license and support to participate in work that comes up that is collaborative and crosses institutional boundaries, because they will get a ton out of it and we'll all gain from the collaborations that they can produce.
Yeah, collaboration. Such a great and such an important word when it comes to cybersecurity. And there's just a discussion thread around, within institutions, how does that work, and who's got the voice? But really, we all have to work together collaboratively as it pertains to cybersecurity. I am going to just suggest to everybody, we're at about 5 minutes of the hour, and I know everybody is hoping to hop into next sessions and probably have other things to be doing in our virtual land. I want to thank my colleagues, Isaac, Jill, and Chad, for their contributions today, and all of the work that they're doing as well. Such important work across Canada, and thanking all of you also who are both here to listen in and learn a few things, but also for the work that you're doing within your own environments around cybersecurity and how you're contributing collectively across higher ed IT in Canada to help us all be more secure. It's been a great pleasure kicking off this first official hour, if we will, of the CANHEIT conference, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in other presentations. Please do take time to review the agenda. There's lots of cybersecurity related content, and CanSSOC is scattered across that, along with the NREN, the global partners discussion, lots of great things for you to tap into if you have more interest in this particular area. So thanks, everybody. I wish you an excellent day, and thanks again to our hosts for putting on this amazing virtual version of CANHEIT 2021. We'll look forward to seeing you over the week, and thanks again, everybody.